From the moment she stepped onto the dirt clearing of the training compound, the wind carried more than dust, it carried judgment. The sun pressed hot against her shoulders, but the heat that burned her hardest came from the eyes of the men around her, elite soldiers built like iron statues, whispering behind gloved hands, smirking as if they already knew the limits of the woman who had dared to enter their world. And yet, nothing stung as sharply as the moment when one of them pointed at the faded mark on her wrist, a tattoo so worn by time and sacrifice that half the ink had become the memory of ink. It was then she understood, today she was not fighting just for a position, she was fighting for her worth. She had come here because promises had shaped her life. A promise to herself, made on a rooftop years ago, when the world felt too big and her dreams felt too small. A promise whispered over a soldier's coffin, the weight of grief heavy enough to carve determination into bone. A promise forged during sleepless nights when she stared at that fading tattoo, tracing the old lines with trembling fingers, reminding herself that courage wasn't loud, sometimes it was quiet, breathless, shaking, but still moving forward. The tattoo wasn't just ink. It was the last thing she shared with the one person who believed she was capable of more than her fear. And now, under the skeptical gazes of men who doubted she belonged, this tattoo had become their reason to mock her. The Delta Force selection course was notorious for breaking even the strongest. Each day felt stretched beyond the limits of human endurance, freezing dawns, punishing climbs, and miles upon miles of terrain meant to test willpower more than muscle. She was used to being underestimated, but here the weight of their disbelief settled on her skin as heavily as the gear on her back. When they laughed at her tattoo, she didn't respond, she simply pulled her sleeve back down and stared ahead, knowing that every step she took had to be louder than their laughter. She carried memories in that faded ink, memories they could never understand. It was the same tattoo her brother once wore, proudly and defiantly, before he gave everything for a mission no one spoke about anymore. There were nights she felt her strength slipping. Nights when her lungs burned so badly she thought they might collapse, where she fell to her knees on cold ground and tasted the metallic tang of failure at the back of her throat. She could almost hear the voices of those who doubted her, from childhood to now, forming a long, echoing chain of disbelief that wrapped around her ribcage like metal wire. But there was always a softer voice somewhere beneath the noise, the memory of her brother telling her she was stronger than she realized, that courage wasn't measured by applause but by persistence. Every time she wanted to quit, she tapped her fingers against the tattoo, feeling for a faint pulse of purpose. Weeks passed. The group around her thinned as men quit, were injured, or simply vanished after failing a crucial assessment. Yet the whispers about her never stopped. Some laughed openly now, not just at her tattoo but at the thought that someone like her believed she could endure what giants struggled to survive. One morning, after a brutal navigation test that left half the candidates limping, one man pointed again at her wrist, telling the others she carried the tattoo of a unit she never deserved to be connected to. A unit from an old Black Ops program long since dissolved. A team her brother once belonged to, a team so secret few even believed it existed. She didn't respond. Instead, she doubled her pace, letting exhaustion bury the sting. On the final week, everything changed. The candidates were assembled before dawn for what the instructors called the Judgment March, a trek so punishing it felt designed to scrape away not just weakness but identity. After hours of climbing and descending through merciless terrain, one soldier behind her tripped, grabbed her pack to steady himself, and tore her sleeve upward. Her tattoo, worn by weather and time, was suddenly exposed before all of them. The laughter spread like wildfire. Someone loudly joked that she must have found the tattoo online or copied it without understanding what it meant. The others roared with amusement, their voices bouncing off the cold rocks around them. But she didn't bow her head. Instead, she stood straighter. The tattoo wasn't new or bright, it was old, cracked in places, the black fading into the color of her skin. To them it looked insignificant. To her it was history. She remained silent, steady, refusing to let the humiliation break what weeks of brutality could not. When they returned to the base, the senior officers were waiting for them. Among them stood a man few had ever seen directly, a Delta Force general known for being both a ghost and a myth. Broad, calm, unreadable, with eyes that scanned hearts rather than faces. He walked slowly across the formation, his steps deliberate. Everyone straightened, suddenly aware of the gravity of his presence. And then he stopped in front of her. For a moment there was only the wind, sweeping sand around their boots. The general's eyes dropped to her wrist, still exposed. The other soldiers held their breath. They expected him to reprimand her, or perhaps to dismiss her altogether. Instead, in a move so unexpected that it shattered the stillness, he raised his hand and peeled off his right glove, revealing an old tattoo, worn, faded, cracked, bearing the exact same insignia as hers. Not similar. Not close. Identical. A murmur rippled through the formation, confusion twisting into awe. The general lifted his wrist slightly, letting the golden morning light fall across the old ink. It was a mark from a unit erased from official records, a symbol carried only by those who had served in the shadows of the world, who had walked missions spoken of only in code, who had lived through darkness most would never understand. A symbol her brother had carried. A symbol this general had once shared with him. He didn't speak, but he didn't need to. His eyes told the story, recognition, respect, and something deeper. A memory perhaps. A tribute. A silent acknowledgement that the tattoo she bore was not faded ink but faded history, the kind that only a few had earned through blood and unspoken heroism. The general then placed his gloved hand firmly on her shoulder, a gesture powerful enough to silence every whisper, every doubt, every ounce of mockery that had ever been thrown at her. At that moment, she felt something inside her shift, the years of grief, the weight of loss, the echo of laughter, all replaced by a quiet, powerful validation. She belonged. Not because they allowed it, but because she had earned every inch of the journey. The men who had mocked her lowered their eyes, the shame hitting them harder than any punishment could have. The tattoo they had laughed at was now revealed to be a badge of legacy far above their understanding. When the selection course ended, she was among the chosen few. Her acceptance wasn't celebrated with applause, but with silent nods from the officers who understood what it meant to carry the kind of story she carried. Her tattoo remained faded, unchanged, but now she wore it openly, the mark of a past that shaped her, a mark that connected her to a brother she lost and to a general who silently honored that bond. As she walked through the compound for the final time, preparing to step into a new chapter of service, she felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. The laughter that once haunted her was gone, replaced by the steady echo of her own steady footsteps, the footsteps of someone who had survived judgment, exhaustion, and heartbreak to rise into a place where only the strongest stood. And if you felt her journey, if her resilience, her loss, her hope touched your heart even for a moment, please consider supporting this video. Sometimes a single act of engagement from you can help stories like hers reach someone who needs strength today. Before we end, write in the comments, respect to those who carry hidden battles.